Imagine this. Your kid's tablet buzzes with a congrats. You've earned a gold star from a free-to-use math app. You smile, thinking you just saved a few bucks on tutoring. But behind that shiny badge lies a data pipeline wider than the school's Wi-Fi. Every answer, every missed question, every late-night study session is being harvested, packaged, and sold to the same ad tech giants we talk about weekly. That, my friends, is the hijacked homework. The hidden surveillance that turns learning tools into listening tools. Today, we'll expose the trackers, decode the contracts, and arm you with some moves to keep your child's education private, not just graded. Schools used to be a place of friendship, of heartbreaks, and passing notes. A place of studying and stressing and rushing assignments. Now, don't get me wrong, all that still happens. But what has changed in schools is the amount of tech in the classroom. From chalkboards to smartboards, the classroom went digital faster than a student can finish a math drill. If you haven't just recently graduated or have kids currently in school, let me give you some insight. Let's dive into the world of EdTech. I'm Sudo, and this is Impractical Privacy. Okay, real quick before we get into this week's episode, I want to circle back to something we talked about weeks ago. We discussed Signal versus WhatsApp, and all that goes into why I believe Signal to be a better choice. I made a statement in that episode, and I wanted to address it. I said that WhatsApp claims that their chats are end-to-end encrypted, and that I believed that was true. What's true is that WhatsApp does claim that, but that claim might not be true. An international coalition of WhatsApp users, people from India, Australia, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, and even here in the US, banded together under the umbrella of a class action lawsuit. Together, the plaintiffs allege that Meta's public claim of end-to-end encryption is false, and that WhatsApp can actually store, analyze, and access virtually all of a user's private communications. This flies in direct opposition to what they claim. I'll keep you guys updated as this goes through the legal system here in the US, but I wanted to own the fact that I had potentially misspoken and put too much faith in Meta. Okay, back to the episode. Class is back in session. Whiteboards are now digital. Tests are done on district-issued Chromebooks. Report cards are issued digitally. Classroom communication is done exclusively through ClassDojo, subscription not included. Let's dive in and start with my opinion of the most insidious pieces of all of EdTech. ClassDojo. For those of you who are lucky enough to not know what ClassDojo is, let me indulge. ClassDojo's own website says, ClassDojo is a global community of more than 50 million teachers and families who come together to share kids' most important learning moments in school and at home through photos, videos, messages, and more. Okay, so at its core, it's a communication tool for teachers to stay in touch with parents. And on the surface, that sounds great. I am absolutely positive that for many families out there, ClassDojo fills a huge need for them. Where the concept loses me is what it tracks and what's paywalled. ClassDojo collects student identifiers, behavior logs, photos, parent contacts, device fingerprints, location data, messages, and even time spent on any specific screen within the app. That's a whole lot of metadata for an app that's meant to connect parents to teachers. And it gets worse. ClassDojo is predatory, not only with features, but with metadata as well. By default, ClassDojo will store everything they collect about your kids indefinitely. Forever, they'll hold on to messages from your child's teacher asking if the electricity at your house got turned off because your kid mentioned it in class once. Forever, ClassDojo will hold on to the messages and inform you that your child is struggling to focus in class and their teacher thinks that they should be tested for autism. Don't forget, ClassDojo also, by their own admission, holds on to behavior logs. This type of data would be illegal for them to hold if your student keyed it into the app themselves. The US has decently strong laws protecting the data of people under the age of 13. But because their teacher entered it into the app, it's fair game. Private messages, teacher notes, grades, behavior data, photos, your contact info, and all the accompanying metadata will sit on ClassDojo servers forever, unless, of course, you're a paying customer and subscribe to ClassDojo Plus, in which case you can request data deletion. That feature is paywalled. Unlimited messages to your child's teacher are also paywalled. This isn't an altruistic venture trying to better education. It's a tech business, and as we've discussed before, tech businesses sell users. To their credit, ClassDojo claims they do not sell any data to advertisers and only share de-identified data with third-party vendors for product improvement. But we know about de-identified data. Now, the problem that I see is most workplaces are requiring some type of AI chatbot usage. Is it that much of a stretch to see a ClassDojo vendor feeding data into a chatbot to help with a problem? Once something goes into a chatbot, it potentially becomes part of the chatbot. Remember, AI companies feed the chats back into the learning part of the AI to help them learn. So suddenly, your child's behavior problems in school are part of an AI chatbot, all because you couldn't delete data on the free tier. And it gets worse somehow as we add other pieces of EdTech into the classroom. Every school these days has a piece of software called an LMS. If you aren't familiar with the term, don't worry, I got you. An LMS is a learning management system. Think Google Classroom, Canvas, or Blackboard, to name a few of the big ones. They get everything. All your students' info, from name down to their social security number. They get grades and assignments. They get every piece of information that a tool like ClassDojo doesn't get. Think of an LMS as a cafeteria line of education. Everyone gets a tray of info, but you don't want the mystery meat of an unknown third-party analytics sneaking onto the plate, which is where it can get ugly. Schools can connect their LMS into ClassDojo for grades and other pieces of information to flow easier from teacher to parent. And ClassDojo already says they never delete anything unless you pay monthly and change the retention policy. It's a dangerous slope connecting these giant pieces of EdTech. And that's just the data the school deliberately shares. What about the stuff they're sharing without trying? Enter the age of the smartboard. A smartboard, sometimes called an interactive whiteboard, a digital whiteboard, or just an interactive display, is basically a giant touchscreen that replaces the old school chalkboards and whiteboards. Teachers can drag and drop images, annotate PDFs, run polls, stream videos, and even run whole class quizzes, all with a stylus or fingertip. Sounds like a classroom upgrade, right? Except underneath that glossy surface lives a mini data center that can see and sometimes listen to what's happening in the room. These new digital whiteboards can and often do record every interaction for product improvement. Some of the more premium ones have cameras and microphones built right in, which can be a lifesaver for digital and distance learning scenarios. Or if the school district signed a cheaper contract, it gives the manufacturer access to those sessions for review and transcription. Remember, school districts nationwide mainly operate on razor-thin margins. EdTech marches forward and schools sign new contracts as part of replacing old equipment. Oftentimes, schools and districts get cheaper rates if they allow more data to be harvested from their equipment. Much of the mindset of, oh, you'll pay, just not with money. Smartboard manufacturers love access to the usage stats, and one way to get them is to sell the boards cheaper if they get access. Modern schools have thousands of connected devices in them all the time and need a healthy internet connection to serve all of them. Each student has a Chromebook, plus all of the administrative devices and infrastructure and cameras. Schools often request ISPs, or an internet service provider, add additional traffic monitoring to their network. Side note here, it is best to assume all internet service providers retain tracking data for all traffic on their network, which is why a VPN is important all the time. So, how is this different? Residential ISPs collect broadband usage totals, IP addresses, possibly coarse-grained site visited for network management or lawful intercept compliances. District contracts often require the ISP to track, report, and review all activity while a student is on the network, effectively treating every click as a data point in a school-wide surveillance ledger. So, why does the distinction matter? Most residential ISPs claim they only retain aggregates for capacity planning. The data is usually not tied to a specific minor. A school is attaching every piece of browsing and internet traffic to a specific pupil. This is true for school-issued Chromebooks and devices utilizing an open Wi-Fi on campus. Some districts even issue take-home hotspot devices for students without internet. The same granular tracking follows the kid wherever they go, right into the living room, the coffee shop, or to grandma's house. But Sudo, my kids aren't even in school. They're too young or homeschooled. This stuff doesn't apply to us. Oh, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here. Buckle up, because it's just as bad with Tutor Apps. Almost all of the education assistance apps are also up to some level of data tracking. Let's look at one of the most popular, Khan Academy. Khan Academy gathers contact info, profile details, authentication data, location, IP derived from the city and zip, device and browser fingerprints, and a rich stream of learning analytics. Clicks, time on task, mastery level tags. The full list is spelled out in their privacy policy. Their platform continuously tracks how long a student spends on a problem, which hints the student requests, where they pause, and what mistakes they repeat. That data fuels the personalized learning engine that decides which exercise to serve next. In March of 2023, they launched Khanmigo, an LLM-powered chatbot that answers questions, gives hints, and even drafts essays. The blog post on Khan Academy's Framework for Responsible AI outlines guardrails, but also admits the system collects interaction logs for safety and improvement. While Khan Academy claims it does not sell the data, the privacy policy permits disclosure to service providers for security, fraud prevention, and compliance. Those providers could be cloud hosts, analytics platforms, or AI model vendors. Now that we covered what they collect, let's talk about why it matters. Even though the platform says it does not sell your information, the sheer volume of personally identifiable information plus granular behavior logs creates a profile that could be repurposed if the company ever changes its business model or is acquired. They collect plenty of analytics. Much of those are behavioral fingerprints. They can uniquely identify a student across services, especially when combined with data from other sources. The real problem here is with the details. Khan Academy is probably trying to do the right thing. After all, they are a signatory of the Student Privacy Pledge. No advertising, no data sales. But the pledge does not restrict internal analytics or sharing with AI training partners. The real problem, again, is with third-party vendors and the types of contracts they have signed. And who's training the AI with what data? We know AI gets fed its own output as training input data. With all that's going on in the edtech space, where does that leave us legally? First up, there's FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. This one is a little outdated, passed in 1974. It protects educational records, which includes grades, transcripts, disciplinary files, and any maintained by an educational agency or institution. Important note, education records do not automatically include data collected by a third-party app unless the school treats that data as part of the record. Next, we've got COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act of 1998. This one is a little bit better. It's the reason services have to make sure that you are at least 13 years old. What it does is require online services directed to kids to obtain verifiable parental consent before collecting personal information. Name, email, IP address, geolocation, things like that. It applies to any app that knows it's collecting data from a child, even if the school provides the account. And federally, that's about all that applies. There are a handful of state laws here and there that provide more protection. California, New York, and Virginia all have laws in place that do more than the federal level does. But what about you guys outside the United States? For those of you in the European Union, if you said GDPR, you'd be correct. The GDPR is again the gold standard for data protection. It requires any app that processes personal data of EU resident students to obtain parental consent and provide right to access, rectification, erasure, and portability. The data controller can be the school, the vendor, or both, so contracts must spell out responsibilities. The UK uses an identical law to the GDPR, so if you're there, you're covered too. Australia has the Privacy Act of 1988, plus the Children's Online Protection and Privacy Amendment of 2023. It requires schools to ensure any cloud-based edtech service stores data on Australian soil or meets cross-border data transfer standards. Canada has the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. This law protects the data of Canadian residents, with children getting enhanced consent rules. Schools acting as organizations must obtain express consent for collecting, using, or disclosing personal information of minors. Brazil has the LGPD, which is similar to the GDPR. It requires parental consent for any child under the age of 13, and Brazilian schools must appoint a data protection officer and provide clear privacy notices. South Africa has the Protection of Personal Information Act. Children receive heightened protections, and it requires reasonable steps to secure data and explicit consent for processing special categories. Notice a theme among these laws. These are almost the exact same set of laws we talked about in last week's episode surrounding healthcare data. If places like the EU, UK, and Brazil can have functioning tutor apps and healthcare and educational systems while also protecting the data of the users, why can't other places? If the pace at which lawmakers work where you live bothers you, reach out to your local representatives about it. The process starts there. Okay, this situation is rough because it's not only a privacy invasion, it involves kids. But now that we've covered the concerns, what can we do about it? For tutoring, pay cash. Use a human. This cuts off the data exchange. A local in-person tutor isn't tracking things the way an app is, and certainly isn't selling session data to an advertiser. You can use burner devices. Use a cheap Android tablet or a secondary phone for any EdTech app that isn't essential. Use a dedicated email. These steps isolate the flow from your primary identity. You can request paper. When signing a new school form on an iPad, ask for a paper version and write, "I do not consent to data sharing for marketing or third-party analytics." Does it work? Maybe not, but it does create a friction point that can deter casual data sharing. You can opt out of the Smartboard. Request that the district disable cameras and mics on Smartboards or that the recordings be auto-deleted after 24 hours. This prevents a permanent audio-video archive of the classroom. Something that we've talked about before is a VPN. You need to be using VPNs everywhere. Install a reputable VPN. Proton VPN and Surfshark are two that I use personally. Install these on all devices doing schoolwork. It encrypts traffic. It breaks the ISP level tracking, regardless of how macro or micro that tracking is. Ask for data deletion. Submit a formal data deletion request to ClassDojo, the LMS vendor, or any third-party analytics provider. This forces the provider to purge the data under GDPR-style rights. Even if they're not legally obliged, many will comply to keep the goodwill. And then contract advocacy. Work with the PTA to demand clear data retention clauses in vendor contracts. This moves the control from the vendor back to the school community. We covered a lot in this week's episode. ClassDojo, LMS platforms, Smartboards, school Wi-Fi, and Tutor Apps. The good news is each layer has a lever that you can pull, whether it's a VPN, a burner device, a paper request, or a contract clause. The bad news is if you leave those levers untouched, the data keeps flowing, and the surveillance state gets a little richer each day. I'm Sudo, and this has been Impractical Privacy, the show that tells you how to lock down your digital life, one gold star badge at a time. If you found this episode useful, hit the subscribe button, drop a review, and consider supporting me on Patreon. Your contribution keeps the trackers confused, the servers humming, and helps write episodes that keep us ahead of the next data-hungry monster. And remember, stay skeptical, stay safe, and keep your kids' homework private, not just graded. Oh, and before you go, why did the surveillance camera apply for a stand-up gig? Because it already had a great record of catching everyone's best angles. I'll see you next week.